Welcome to Critical Q&A number 512 on this September 7th in the year of our Lord 2025. Thank you very much for being part of my week. I really look forward to this time of the week when I get to hang out with you guys. I hope we get some more awesome critical questions like we did last week. And a regular, wonderful assortment of awesomeness from all of y'all. Okay, let's let's go ahead and get the. Speaking of, let's get the Q&A box set up here. Please put your questions here, as we always do. All right. Start Q&A. Yeah. Now the weather is changing and becoming a little cooler now, so I have opted for the return of my sort of, I don't know what to call these. I call these my Rogan shirts. I don't know what else to. Anyway, these long sleeves sort of pullover cotton shirts I have. So anyway, yeah, because the temperatures are getting a little non-Hawaiian, I guess you could say. So I really do like those shirts, by the way. So we may see more of those in the future. Let's switch over to the host and chat screen so we can get you guys on the screen as well and see your comments as we're going right along here. Yes. Oh, thank you for that super chat, Sam. Super chats are always appreciated on this show, by the way. It seems to have gone the way of the dodo or something that super chats happen anymore. There was a period of time where they were quite popular, and I'd be okay with, them becoming popular again. Okay. I guess one of the things is it's hard because I can't transfer the super chat question over into the question box thing here. Anyway, whatever. Just throwing that out there that I love y'all's support of my show and my work. Let's go ahead and do our usual beginning of the show things as folks come on board here. First off, we have our Benson cam. Let me get over here to, there it is. There he is. Here is our little bundle of furry joy. Not 20 minutes ago, I took this shot. He is really being a little fuzzy wuzzy monster right now. He needs a haircut so bad, and I've just been putting it off all week. I meant to, one of y'all fan sent me some dog clippers, some real good ones, and I need to get into using them. And I just kind of lazed out this week and didn't do it. So Benson is still Mr. Fuzzy Wuzzy there, and we'll see about handling that this next week. He's you can see here, he is sort of in mid-range energy level right now. He really got the zoomies last night. Oh my God, was he really like a little lightning bolt up and down the hallway, jumping up and down on the bed. It was really quite something. Watching him go to town like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and pop back over to the chat screen here. Yeah, our little, the most, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again. The most uttered phrase, the thing that is said in this household more than anything else is us talking to Benson and telling him how cute he is. We literally can't get enough of it. I don't even know what words to use anymore. I mean, you just want to eat him up. He's just so cute, and we can't ever stop thinking that about him. He's just such an adorable little creature. Okay, now let us also not forget to check our critical thinking cards here, and let's get these guys shuffled up real good. These are, as you guys know, these are my critical thinking cards. I don't get paid to do this, but I really love it when I get to talk about these things. So critical thinking is kind of how you tune up the cognitive or rational layer of your thinking. Critical thinking is sort of getting it in shape. You know, you could think about it that way. I think it's a good analogy. I think the martial arts analogy is good for trying to communicate that there's a discipline to critical thinking. It's not just some things that you read about and then oh yeah, I remember, you know, logical fallacies and every now and again. So I'm a critical thinker, right? These are important to your thinking, but it is the practice of it. And I know I come off preachy. I know I come off lectury. I know. I'm gonna try to dial that back. Now here is our bias, our most famous, infamous bias pops up this week, and it is confirmation bias. You favor things that confirm your existing beliefs. You do that. You, right there, watching me right now, you favor things that confirm your existing beliefs. We all do. We have things we want to believe are true. We have faith in things. We have emotional investment in things. And we need them to be true so that our sense of how the world is supposed to look and act and feel is satisfied. And so we will look for and find things in the environment or in what people tell us or in what we read that confirm what we believe. And we will tend to ignore or negate those things that don't confirm what we believe, that contradict us. We hate that. And that's confirmation bias. We are primed to see and agree with ideas that fit our preconceptions and to ignore and dismiss information that conflicts with them. Quote from Richard Feynman, one of the smartest guys I've ever read, you know, the quantum physicist guy. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool. Good stuff, huh? Okay. So this is, yeah, it is the best bias, isn't it? So it's learning these things, just like in martial arts, you learn the punches, you learn the kicks, but you don't just go into the dojo, throw a couple kicks, throw a couple punches, and think you're a black belt, right? You got to practice, you got to practice, you got to practice. And it's this practicing this muscle is the most important thing we could be doing for ourselves, especially these days in our very, very post-truth world. I cannot push hard enough back against post-truth bullshit out there. We're steeped in it right now. We are up to our necks in it. I can see it in some of the comments I get on my channel, and I got this tiny little YouTube channel. And people come here and they argue with me about things that are just shocking to me to be argued about, you know. This post-truth world we are in is really something. And I wanted to comment today, not going to try to monologue too long, but I did want to bring this up because it was something that came up in my own life, and I thought that I should pass it on to you guys, as I do, having to do with the REM model. As you guys know, I've put together a model of human behavior. This is something I'm not going to stop talking about. I'm very, very happy with it. And the more experience and the more use I get out of my REM model, rationality or rationalization, emotion, and morality. That's what the REM stands for. And it's the basic, you know, sort of stack or sandwich of layers that we operate on that drive us to do what we do, that make us behave the way we do. It's that simple, and I haven't yet found anything that blows this model up or makes me think that I'm wrong about this. Everything I've been running across and every example I've been able to find or question that gets thrown my way or person I'm dealing with or a situation I read about, it fits. It fits in there. And so I wanted to clarify again, talk a little bit more this week about the emotion layer and the morality layer, because a lot of talk on this, especially on this channel, is based around our emotional needs. And I got one guy coming into my comments telling me that's my belief and there are no such thing as emotional needs, which blew me again. I just go, wow. I'm just blown away by the ignorance of some of the comments that I receive from people. I get some brilliant comments from you guys. Let me be clear that I don't want to just harp on the negative. Sometimes I get some feedback from you guys that is really thought-provoking and very interesting. So please do keep it coming. I'm not trying to tell you don't comment on my videos, but man, some of the challenges I get are just like amazing. And we concentrate a lot in the X-Cult world on emotions and emotional needs. And this is something I talk up all the time. But there is this more fundamental layer below that, which is your morality, your moral foundations, which have to do with not only your rules or your etiquette or how you think you should get along in the world, but it also encompass those rules and those manners and etiquette and the way we sort of socially lubricate is just part of our moral makeup. It's really the layer that is sort of like putting a template over the world of how you think or how you feel the world should look and what makes sense. What's the order in which things are ordered and not chaotic and not crazy and not unmanageable. That has everything to do with why morals and morality exists in the first place for us, is it brings order. And and there's a lot of people out there, there's some people out there who really live in that plane of, you know, that layer of the moral layer. They're driven by emotions, certainly, we all are, emotional needs, to be specific. Not when I say emotional needs, I'm not talking about moment to moment reactions that are emotional, like when you get angry or when you get sad about something. Those aren't emotional needs. Emotional needs are longer term issues of community and purpose, meaning, a sense of self, a sense of community, as mentioned, a sense of justice, right, which comes out of our morality. Those are the emotional layer stuff. But underneath that, you have people who really run on morality and really they're driven by, or their behavior is really determined by, their sense of order and meaning and the rules. You know, how things are supposed to be, and what we might call all of our ought tos or our shoulds, you know, the things we think of immediately as, well, you should do or you ought to, you know, those kind of things. And I just wanted to highlight that layer can be just as or even more deterministic in our behavior than even the emotional needs. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of put that out there, right? People can live very strict, very ascetic, very disciplined lives. They can live very structured, maybe that's a better word, structured lives, right? Like they really want things just so. And I'm not talking about some kind of like pathology like OCD or something where everything has to be in its place and every dust particle has to be, you know, out of this has to be a clean room or something. I don't mean extremity of behavior. I mean regular people that you run into, see on the street, you know, relatives you might have, people you work with. Some of them are really, really determined by their moral layer. And it's really something to watch and sort of analyze people that way and watch how they lay their templates of how things ought to be over their world and over the world of other people. In fact, that's another way of describing how cult members can get, because they can get pretty moralistic on their own dogmatic belief set. And anyway, just throwing that out there as some more food for thought for you. And of course, you can feel free to ask me any questions about my REM model. I love talking about it. Okay. Hey, Scientology Geek is here. Awesome. So let's get to, without further ado, let's get to your questions. Now, I've also got 3 preset questions. I had a couple last week, and I always just mind blank because I'm a dork. So let's go ahead and pop over to one of those questions to start with. Here we go, so that we don't forget to get these into the mix. Funny, let me just make sure that our stream is going okay. Looks like it is. Good. All right, here we go. Funny Hat sent me a question. You mentioned in some of your videos that the Sea Org has its own security. Yes, they do. And obviously, the RPF is a very restrictive prison-like atmosphere. Yes, it is. But were you allowed to leave at any time if you had so chosen? No. As in, if 2 days into your RPF experience, you'd say, I'm done, would they have let you go? Furthermore, was the security staff just made up of other converts such as yourself? If so, was there a chance you might have become one? Okay. So, no, I would not have been allowed to just get up and leave the RPF if I wanted to. That's just not how that works any more than you can just get up out of prison and go, okay, I'm done. I get it. I get the point. I get it. I'm done. I don't need this. And you just get up and walk out of the prison. Yeah, no, that's not how that's going to work any more than it's going to work when you're in Scientology and the Sea Org. You are in a controlled environment. The boundaries of that environment are physically drawn out for you on the Sea Org base on which you operate, and there are rules, and there is a security system in place on every Sea Org base with video cameras and patrolling guards who watch the crew. Their job is to keep the base secure from external threats, but it is also, and more importantly, as far as they're concerned, inward facing to keep tabs on any out ethics behavior going on within the group. And they watch everyone like a hawk. To do that, they have cameras in all the levels of all the buildings and keep tabs on everything. And they got this big control center with all these monitors and everything, and they watch very closely. When it comes to something like the RPF that you asked about specifically, of course, now the RPF doesn't exist anymore as such, but everything I'm telling you here, this attitude and the control of the environment does still exist within the Sea Org, even if the RPF doesn't. So if you are in ethics trouble, if you're sent down to the galley to scrub dishes or up to the bathrooms to scrub the toilets with a toothbrush or some other menial physical discipline or something, everything I'm saying is still just as true. There is no opt-out button where you're just like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to do this. If you try that, you will find yourself at the receiving end of physical and psychological torment. Whether it is people literally locking you in a room or physically imposing themselves on you and dragging you to wherever it is you're supposed to be, or keeping you in the space or location if you're trying to leave, they will do that. They will get in your way, put their body between you and the door, stop you from leaving. Yeah, of course they will, right? And this has been long, this has always been how it is in the Sea Org. Man or woman doesn't matter, right? They will lay their hands on you and they will stop you. Even, whether you're big, whether you're small, whether you're a child, whether you're a senior citizen, it doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that when I say things like it's a controlled environment, that I am very much understood on that point. There's no, leaving is not an easy option. If you insist that you want to leave, I do not want to be here, I don't want to do this, this isn't my jam anymore, I want to go, they will eventually let you go, you understand, but not right away. You're going to have to jump through a series of hoops that they're going to satisfy them that you have coughed up all of your overts, your sins, and that you have, confessed everything, whether you write it down on a ream of paper or whether you get an ethics interview and or a security check. they're going to want to insist that you follow their rules about that, because L. Ron Hubbard says in crystal clear terms in the ethics book and in numerous bulletins that the only reason that someone leaves Scientology at all for any reason is because of their overts, their wrongdoing. So if you're trying to leave, they immediately assume and will only believe that the reason you are doing that is because you have transgressed morally against the group. You broke the rules, you got away with it, and that made you want to leave. So they're going to insist that you first confess to everything before they let you go. And of course, this has the added side benefit of giving them all kinds of potential blackmail material to use against you and denigrate you and assassinate your character, so that after you're gone, they can say, look at what all this stuff is that this guy did, and look at what a jerk he is. And of course, he's suppressive, and of course we kicked him out. Right? Because that's how they then spin the narrative after they do finally let you go, is they make it out that you were always a bad apple and that kind of thing. And they use your confessions against you. Okay, so that's the simplicity of that answer. As far as the security staff, the security staff are Sea Org members. So yeah, there are other converts like me. However, in order to be in security or in Division 1, the Scientology organizing system of the staff and the way they organize their churches, their organizations, is they divide it up into 7 divisions. And Division 1 is called the Hubbard Communications Office, and that is the division that deals with ethics and communication and hiring and human resources and all of that. So security and all of the security forces are always part of Division 1, they're always part of HCO. And in order to work in HCO, there are certain qualifications you have to meet. There's an IQ requirement, there's ethics history. You can't have had a bad ethics history or have gotten involved in a lot of weird sex stuff, or, any kind of, even before you were in Scientology, you can't have been involved yourself in any of that. I don't remember if LSD, I don't think LSD is an HCO qualification. It's a Sea Org qualification though, so you can't get into the Sea Org and be in security if you've taken LSD, because you can't be in the Sea Org if you've taken LSD. But HCO has these more, my point is HCO has more strict requirements to work there than other parts of the organization. And I had to tell you about all that because I don't meet those qualifications. So to answer your question of, was there a chance I might have become a security guard? No. There was never any chance I was going to become a security guard because I'm not HCO qualified. It wasn't the IQ. I think it was the past. Oh yeah, I blew. You cannot ever in your Scientology history have taken off or gone AWOL or blown, is what the word they use for that. You blew. You can't have blown. If you have, you're considered a potential security risk for the rest of your life. You're somebody who took off one day. And even if you come back and fix it, which I did, you still did it. And so they're never going to let you work in HCO if you did something like that. So that's why I would not be a security guard ever. And of course, now I'm not qualified for the Sea Org at all. But I never wanted to be in security. It was just a hellhole job and not one that I wanted to have anything to do with. Okay, so that is our first preset question. Now let's go back to the chat here and pick up on the next questions. Here we go. Trying to be a little more short and to the point, as always. I'm just going to say this. I look back on my videos each week. I review the work that I do, and I'm always like, oh man, do I talk too much, in some of these answers, and get off into stuff that just doesn't, it seemed important to me at the time. And then I watch it later and I'm like, man, that did not come off well. So I'm trying to not put that stuff together or do that more. Okay, here we go. Young Matador asks, hey, Chris, it's been 20 years since Shelly Miscavige was last officially seen in public. Yes, apparently that is so. Is there even a 1% chance she'll be seen again? Yeah, of course there is. Shelly could appear anytime. She's had a few public sightings at a store, at a restaurant, stuff like that. Shelly's, living a life in Scientology, working up at the Twin Peaks base for the Church of Spiritual Technology. That's the reporting and information that we have as to what she's doing. And so could she be seen again? Sure, of course she could. Miscavige could die. She could reappear. She could go back into the exec strata of the church, right? Or she could stay relegated to where she is as sort of persona non grata down there in, I should say up there, because CST, the Church of Spiritual Technology, where she works, is a very, very high level organization within Scientology's structure. She's just verboten around, Miscavige. He just doesn't want to see her, think about her, or have anything to do with her. And for 20 years, he's been able to do that. It's an interesting, sort of talking point about Scientology. It's an interesting thing to look at, Shelly Miscavige. So we talk about it, but it's, it just kind of is what it is. Feel free to ask me anything more about that, but I can't really think of anything more to say about Shelly that hasn't already been said 10 times over. Let's carry on. X-Cyan, thank you for posting the podcast with Jon Atack. He's always a great person to listen to with all his knowledge and stories. The two of you together is almost too much to handle anymore. Well, it was way more popular than I thought it was going to be. I will definitely say that. I did not think that show was going to take off the way that it did in terms of the number of views it's had so quickly. Most of the time I put podcasts up and videos up and, I'll get a few hundred views in the first day or two, not a few thousand. So clearly there was a great deal of interest in the occult origins of Scientology and the Nazi Party, and there are common origins between Aryan race theory and Scientology's thetans and body thetans and spiritual, the legacy from which Scientology comes is the same places, that has the same root sources that the Aryan race theory comes from, and the OTO and Aleister Crowley's beliefs. So isn't that interesting, right? It's just so interesting. And John's always a hoot to talk to, and it's been far too long since he and I have done a regular series of shows together. We just got involved in other things and talking to other people on our channels and stuff for a while, but I think you're going to see more from him and me this for the, in the moving forward for the rest of this year. We don't have a specific plan right now on getting together again, but I'll probably reach out to him in a month or so and say, hey, let's get together and talk about something. He's got I mentioned at the end of the podcast this week that he has some other irons in the fire of Scientology related stuff that's not totally fresh, that you have never heard anything about before. Some of it you have heard before, but he's got some other new stuff. Anyway, he's got some things coming that are really, really kind of fun. And I hope you guys will check out his work and his channel. Always great talking to John. All right, X-Cyan also asks, your thoughts on the DOJ currently looking for ways to ban transgender Americans from owning guns. Also, on an executive order barring transgender people from serving in the military. These guys. I don't know what else I could say that's going to add anything. I don't know. Some of y'all really hate it when I start talking about Trump. But the man's a fool and a dotard, and he's clearly clearly irrational, mentally incompetent for the job. And, well, wasn't Biden? Yes, Biden was too, okay? Jesus, it's always one or the other with some of you folks, you know what I mean? If I'm critical of Trump, I must be supporting Biden or something. It's like, I just get sick of it sometimes, you know? Can we please rise above binary stupidity and come to a place where we realize that our political system is broken and corrupt and really needs an overhaul? Could we just agree on that instead of having to argue constantly about political personalities? We have systemic issues, and this kind of thing is so. If the core problem is here, this kind of thing, and I'm not at all down on you for asking me about this, Xian. I'm just making a point that if there's a core issue with our government, or a set of core issues with our government, this kind of thing is way out in the periphery as a sign or symptom of those core issues, right? Looking for ways to ban transgender Americans from owning guns. Are you fucking kidding me? The Second Amendment is crystal clear that the right to bear arms will not be infringed upon by our government, period, end of goddamn story. You know, and the idea that transgender people somehow shouldn't have guns is so ludicrously, stupidly ridiculous that only an asshole would actually put that out there as something to, yeah, let's do that. Let's spend money and time and resources taking a slice of a slice of a slice of this population and taking more rights away from those people and persecuting them even harder and making them more of a persecuted minority of Americans who we can strip rights from, right? The transgender population is a tiny, tiny slice of American population. And Trump and his crew play you guys so hard on this issue, it's actually sad to watch. It's pathetically sad to watch how people's heads explode over the issue of transgenderism. It is an issue that is never going to touch your life in any significant, specific way if you are 99.9% of Americans, right? It has nothing to do with you. And this idea that we have to strip these people of their rights, persecute them, get them fired from their jobs, culturally destroy them. Trump is just playing you people, and it's just so sad to watch. I'm just so sick of it. As far as Trump's, Trump has written more executive orders. King Trump, and fuck that guy, has written more executive orders misusing what an executive order even is. He thinks it's just a law and that he gets to write. And it's not. It's not what executive orders are or what they were ever meant for. But King Trump, the most ignorant, the stupidest president we have ever had in history, and the most unpopular at this point. I don't know that he knows what he's even doing anymore, Yeah. So there's my rant. I ranted. I know I did. I just ranted. We go from don't ask, don't tell, Clinton's bullshit, which was not helpful at all, to this. And it's like, what a fantastic waste of everyone's time. That's really what I kind of think about this, is it is a fantastic waste of everyone's time. It is Trump playing his base, riling them up, and pissing off the progressives. Here I am pissed off, right? Over sheer stupidity, things that absolutely positively do not matter in the bigger picture, right? In other words, transgender people should be allowed to serve in the military and own guns just like any other able-bodied American citizen should be able to. If you have mental health issues of a pathological nature that make you dangerous to yourself or others, you should not own a gun. Being transgender is not that. So anyone who thinks it is, or who has some big, chip on their shoulder about transgender people, needs to calm the fuck down and go touch grass, because you're all wrapped up in something that doesn't mean anything to you or your life. That's my big hot take today on that. I just have no patience for Trump's bullshit today, and you're hearing about it. So that's my, okay, so I won't linger on that. Let's carry on. Actually, this is a good opportunity to skip back over to the other page and take up one of y'all's other questions. Let's go back over to the question page. Here we go. Okay. These are from the emails that y'all send me, by the way. I think I've mentioned that before, but yeah, so you can email me at askchrisshelton@gmail.com, and I will take up your questions by putting them here during the show. Xenu, the abuse that Scientology does is baked into LRH policy. Yes, it is. So would it be reasonable to assume that Independent Scientology is also guilty of abusive actions, since they also revere LRH? Yes, it would be reasonable to assume. It is an absolute fact that Independent Scientologists abuse people through the practice of Scientology. They are not abusive because they revere L. Ron Hubbard. You can revere somebody all day long and not do an abusive thing at all. That's not why Independent Scientology is abusive. It's abusive because it continues to use a system of authoritarian control and mind enslavement outside of the parameters of a formal structured Church of Scientology, but it still uses procedures and methods and techniques that are psychologically damaging to the recipients. If you get auditing, you are suffering almost immediately from a number of things that are not good for you, from a controlled environment, a controlled therapeutic environment. In other words, they lock you in the damn room and don't let you leave until they say you can leave. That's just as true in Independent Scientology as it is inside the church. If you're going to audit somebody, according to the way L. Ron Hubbard said, to audit somebody, that's what you do 100% of the time. You lock people in a room and you don't let them out until you say they've had whatever gain or release you judge they've had, using your electronic, psychometer bullshit that doesn't even work and doesn't even do anything useful or important. That's Independent Scientology, right? They have the right to do that. You can go do that, but it's harmful. It is absolutely harmful to your psychology and your good mental health and emotional stability to do Scientology. Just because you tamp down the ethics and the authoritarian, totalist system of Scientology in the Independent Scientology field, they're a lot looser about ethics and a lot looser about the totalist control that they put on their pre-clears or their students there, but they're still insisting on and following Scientology's procedures. Even study tech is abusive in a learning environment. What word did you not understand? Well, I don't think it's a word. No, it's a word you didn't understand, and you better find it, and you better look it up, and you better clear it up. That's what you do, right? And at the end of the day, that Scientology is an enforced rule set that you have to do what L. Ron Hubbard wrote so that you will get this result. But that ain't how you get those results. You don't learn things by demanding people clear their words as the only form of debugging somebody's inability to learn things. It's not just misunderstood words or lack of mass or skipped gradients that cause people to be unable to learn things. There's a laundry list of stuff connected with learning and education that have nothing to do with misunderstood words or lack of mass that barrier people being able to learn things. And if you only apply, if everything is a nail and you got, if you got the hammer, everything is a nail, right? That old saw. So even in the education department, in the training areas of independent Scientology, they're still foisting off abusive behavior and calling it, patting themselves on the back for a job well done. It's not right. And then, in the auditing, both objective and subjective forms of Scientology auditing are trance-inducing hypnotic nonsense that produce a peak emotional experience with an interpretation thrown on the top of now your spirit's better. And so now your life is so much better because you had a peak emotional experience. That's not what human transformation is made from. You don't transform people and make them into better versions of themselves by giving them peak emotional experiences and call it a one and done. Right? That's not how human psychology works. And it's not how change over time works. But that's what Hubbard and Earhart and every other one of these, cult guru nonsense people tell you. They insist on it, right? If we do these special tricks, we can hack your mind and get it, move the levers of the control panel of your psyche, and we're going to make you a better person. No, that's not how that works. I'm sorry, but it takes a lot more time and a lot more discipline and effort to create change that actually is lasting change in a person, right? And it takes a dedicated effort on your part to be able to do that. It's not just going into a room, fantasizing about false memories from a million years ago, and then walking out feeling electrified. Oh, I'm such a different person than when I walked in this room. No, you're not. You're not. Because it doesn't work that way. We have epiphanies, and I'm not trying to take away from anybody's epiphanies. But to call that some kind of permanent transformation is a misnomer and a disservice to the people who are being told that. And independent Scientologists are told that just as often as Scientologists are told that, right? And it's just not true. So there's just loads and loads and loads of false information and false expectations being loaded on someone, whether they're a Scientologist in the church or a Scientologist outside of the church. That's my take on it. And I believe, I do believe of course I'm saying all these things because I believe them. I believe I'm right. So anyway, so there you go. There's my answer on independent Scientology. All right. I'm sorry that when I skip back over to the host and chat, the chat is emptied out. I wish it was able to to keep itself refreshed. But it just refreshes when I go. It empties out and then I come back and then it starts filling back up again as you guys write more comments. Okay, so let's carry on here with your questions. Sam Slade. Hey, Sam. I have often imagined who would be a moderate successor to Miscavige. Mark Yeager, Ray Midoff, Shelly. Then who would a hardline successor be? Jenny Linson, David Bloomberg, your thoughts. Okay, well, these are all names that we know about, but I don't think any of these names are people who are going to be taking over Scientology if Miscavige were to leave, whether through hook or crook, perp walked or, dies one night peacefully in his sleep. However Miscavige goes, somebody's going to have to step up. And I don't think it's going to be anybody you listed. I think it's going to be somebody we don't know who's probably going to be a successor person. Why do I think that? Because most of these folks are too old and too broken. When you've lived for years under the kind of intense domination that David Miscavige, meets out, right, to his inner circle or the people, closest to him, the Mark Yeagers and Ray Midoffs of the world. I don't even know if Mark or Ray are even still alive. These are some old folks. You know, these guys have been around for a long time. David Bloomberg, I mean, that guy was gray when I saw him 20 years ago. He had gray hair. You know, these are some old folks. And it's going to take somebody stepping up who's going to be incredibly energetic and a real go-getter, right? Who's going to take over Scientology, because they're going to have their hands full. One, catching up on all the hidden, you know, landmines that are just sitting around Miscavige's world that nobody knows anything about, including us. But I'm sure they're there, right? I'm sure there are investment strategies. I'm sure there are personal relationships. I'm sure there are promises that have been made and agreements that have been made that Miscavige has made that no one knows about, right? Or very, very, very few people. And those are there, whether Miscavige is around or not, right? Expectations, responsibilities, money, you know, stuff like that, influences. And whoever steps up is going to have to pick up on all that real fast and be able to wheel and deal and figure out on the fly how to deal with all that stuff. And that's just one part of the job. Then there's the public facing part of it. There's the the strategic direction of where to take Scientology. There's a lot of balls in the air when it comes to taking over Scientology. They're just dealing with people like Tom Cruise, right? Hey, you're going to have to get Tom Cruise on your side, and you're going to have to get the other celebrities on your side, and they're not going to all just necessarily fall into line. You know, when there's a succession problem or issue, this is when factioning and, you know, Splitsville happens all the time in the world of religion. In history, right? These succession things are the most delicate times of any organization's track. And if they're not, and if it's not handled well, if the person who doesn't step up, and so you're going to need somebody who's going to know some of what's going on. Has a very, very strong head on their shoulders, is very determined to, and a very, like, ideally somebody who would be like a real firm believer in Scientology, because that's going to communicate. If they're not a true believer, they won't be able to bring, you know, the same degree of intensity to what they're doing. There is a difference, I think, my opinion. LRH2. Yeah, we'll just get him out of prison. So who it's going to be, you know, I don't know, and I'm not going to sit here and throw names out randomly because I don't even know who the power people are. See, I'm thinking it's probably going to be whoever is running upper middle management, or is still cogent and rational at the international management level. And I don't know who those folks are. And if it's a psycho, then Scientology's demise will just be hastened. And if it's a rational player who can see and think on the fly and not just be a Ron bot, so to speak, right? Not just be a literal, this is what Miscavige did, so this is what I must do. You know, if you get somebody who's actually got a head on, you know, their head on straight and takes over Scientology, there could be very interesting things that could happen. Very interesting, right? I mean, there could be a renaissance of Scientology if you had somebody who really believed in Scientology's human rights dogma and way to happiness, and actually thinks that what Hubbard wrote is, you know, is how they should run this thing. You know, those kinder, gentler policies, I mean, right? If they took those things to heart. But there's so much written inside Scientology for the senior executives and OSA of Scientology that you guys never see, that is so hardcore and so hateful and so corrupting, you know, that I don't know how you could take over Scientology, be indoctrinated in all that stuff, and still keep a rational head on your shoulders. You know what I mean? I mean, that needs to be said out loud, I think. That, you know, it would be incredibly hard to get a sensible person to take over. So anyway, I don't know. These are my thoughts, Sam. I know they're kind of a little bit all over the place, but it's not, it's just from outside, and especially for somebody like me who's been outside for 12 years, it's impossible for me to name names of who's going to take over. You know, I just don't know. So all I can do is sort of talk about types of people, and I don't know. You know, I know I'm kind of circling around and not really, I'm just going to end it at that. Okay, good. Okay. Michael Yoder. Love your convos with Ann Peterson. Thanks. I do too. Ann's cool. Would love to see you compare the special language between Scientology and EST. Landmark. Yeah, there are similarities, postulates, possibilities, ethics, integrity, thoughts. Yeah, Michael, you're nailing it. Absolutely. We should do that. What we would really be doing is taking the map that Werner Erhard made, where he had his people. This is going all the way back to the 1970s. Werner Erhard's the guy who ran EST. He created it. And he then turned it into Landmark, and you know, the forum and Landmark Forum, which it is now, Landmark. And it's just a Scientology squirrel group. I mean, that's really pretty much what it is, with a bunch of you know, human potential movement crap thrown into the middle of it, like, you know, from mind dynamics and some of those other groups from that time. There were a number of them. Mind dynamics is just the easiest one for me to remember, because that's the one that Werner came out of specifically. But he ordered his people to take the Scientology Tech Dictionary, and he was using the terminology right out of Scientology. And he said, come up with new names for this stuff, right? Same ideas, but new names, right? Postulates, possibilities, ethics, integrity, etc. Werner was just such a fucking dick, that guy. He was just such a complete douche. It would be interesting to go over how he changed those language, you know, changed the language though, and some of the concepts. Yeah. I'll just try to answer this quickly by just saying, yeah, it's that would be an interesting exercise to do. Oh, there's another question from Sam. Mormons and evangelicals historically have had higher birth rates, which may affect the long-term continuation of their respective religions. Yeah, I worry about that. Do you think the Church Scientology hierarchy cares about member birth rates? I don't know, but I don't think so, because David Miscavige I've never once heard him comment about population, demographics, or birth rates within or outside of Scientology. Never once have I heard him utter or say anything in that direction. Hubbard said that this is a radically underpopulated planet. Hubbard had ideas that there could be billions and billions and billions more people on this planet, and that they could be technologically, you know, that we have the technology and the means with which to feed them and stuff like that. That's the only thing I remember him commenting on when it comes to population and growth and stuff like that. So I don't think they really have their finger on the pulse of that. But most importantly, I don't think, or most to the point of this, I don't think David Miscavige pays attention to this, because look at, sorry, just trying to check something here. Look at the Sea Org and the fact that you can't have kids there. So if you can't have, like, if he really cared about second gen converts and turning that over into higher birth rates, then they would set up facilities within the Sea Org for kids, right? But that was such a absolute disaster when they tried that. They did it so badly that obviously Miscavige's solution was forget it. We're not canceled, right? Abortions, vasectomies, no reproduction going on amongst Sea Org members. That's a distraction. We don't want any of that. It's very akin to, or sort of parallel thinking to, China's one-child policy, which for decades they had in place. I believe it was decades, certainly a long time. China was forcing abortions on, mothers, so every family could only have one child. And it was horrifying what they did to enforce that. Miscavige, same kind of thinking. Kids, distraction. Kids, no kids, right? I don't know if it's true or not. Mark Headley said Miscavige is terrified of kids because he doesn't want their body thetans jumping on them. I think that's kind of funny, but I think Miscavige, I think he just doesn't like kids, right? I just don't think he's a very, into that whole thing. And so where that goes, of course, is that his most ardent followers, or the true believers of Scientology, aren't having kids. So I guess Miscavige doesn't really think reproduction is the basis of morale, right? So no, I don't think that they care about that. And all of that to say no, I don't think they care about it in the Church of Scientology. I'm told by a couple sources that there is an effort right now to pilot and test out, right, this whole new line of children's services for Scientologists, new kids courses and maybe auditing services, but certainly coursework. They're revamping that stuff. Is it a repackage of what they've already done, or are they bringing something new to the table? I don't know. Everything I know, I just told you. So it's not, apparently it's not the case that there's no attention on children in Scientology, or making children into Scientologists, or laying the groundwork for them to become Scientologists amongst the public children, but not the Sea Org, right? Miscavige has those two things clearly, divided. Whereas it's funny, because if he ordered Sea Org members, if he really wanted to get birth rates going, or get kids, like that whole thing, to make more Scientologists, Miscavige could so easily order, all Sea Org women of a certain age are to get pregnant. I want kids. I want Sea Org kids. I want cadets everywhere, right? We're going to have a cadet base, and we're going to set up cadet things. And he could even set up a whole, Spartan kind of system where all the kids are taken from the parents at like age 4 or 5 or something, and off they go to the, the childtorium, where they're going to be trained up as little Sea Org cadets, and become lifelong Sea Org members. The golden age of applied scholastics. That's right. He could do something like that. He could do something like that tomorrow, and suddenly all the Sea Org members are just having tons of sex and tons of kids, right? I mean, it could happen. They could do that. I don't know numbers wise if it's justified that they do something like that, but he could, and I think once he realizes, I don't know what he knows right now. It's hard to tell. It's hard to know what Miscavige really is aware of, right? Does he know Scientology is shrinking? Does he realize that the second gen has more attrition than retention? Does he realize, in other words, more kids of Scientologists are leaving and don't want to have anything to do with Scientology than want to stay? Does he know that? I don't know. And if he does know that, are these kids courses his solution to that? Because that's not what's going to handle it, not really. You would need a harder push than that. So there's still a lot of question marks wrapped up in this kid thing for me, Sam. But I do like, sort of sitting here conjecturing about it. So thanks for asking me about this. I guess we'll see where it goes. But I don't really have any question right now that they're not thinking too much about member birth rates. I don't think that's a thing for Miscavige right now. Okay. Okay, let's jump over to, we're an hour in, we're doing great. Let's jump over to our last question. Let's flip back over here and throw up number 3. Okay, from JND, another one of my Patreon supporters. Love you, Patreon guys. Psychology question: is there a name for the phenomenon in which memory is particularly fallible due to later experience? I don't really mean PTSD or trauma, more the idea of how a period of intense indoctrination might influence memories of the time before indoctrination. This is a great question, and yes, there are terms for this. I actually looked some stuff up. What you're talking about is called the misinformation effect. It's a phenomenon where a person's recall of an event becomes less accurate because of information they receive after the fact of the event. Any event. I mean, this is but especially, certain kinds of events, I suppose. Let's say you're exposed to there was a psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus who sort of demonstrated some ways of influencing people's memories by asking them leading questions about past events. If you use certain language in the way you ask questions, you can actually affect how a person remembers a thing. This is not settled science. This is not universally the case that if you use particular language in a particular way, you will always get the result of corrupted or twisted up memory, but you can. And it's a little interesting. For example, if we're talking about some kind of a car accident, and I'm asking you to remember what that incident looked like or what the accident scene was like, and maybe it wasn't that big of a fender bender, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal, maybe no glass was broken in the accident. But I ask you about the event, and I ask you, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? When you had that riveting, horrifying crash, how fast were you going? And with questions like that, that intensify the experience beyond what it really was, you can get people remembering aspects of the accident to fit that framing of it and alter their memory to fit that it was worse than it really was. Oh, there was broken glass everywhere. I can see it in my mind's eye. I remember clearly the glass was shattered, and you go back and look, and there was no shattered glass anywhere. There was no broken glass because it wasn't that big of an accident, right? But people can remember it that way because of the way they are asked about it or talk about it or recount it, right? These things can affect your memory in very, very interesting ways. We really, really need to be clear about the fact that our memory is malleable like clay. And very rarely are memories put in a kiln and solidified like clay is, to carry on that, right, thought. And so they're always the same, right? You remember a thing, and then you remember remembering that thing, and then you remember remembering that thing. And those are the things that cause or can enter in, shall we say, mutations into the memory. And if people are curving emotionally incendiary or morally challenging questions at you, or making statements about your memories or events in your past that, you know, inflame your passion, so to speak, you can alter those memories so quickly. Then there is something like, we can talk about, something like the truth rundown, which is a concentrated form of enforcing or dominating your mind to force you to rewrite your memories so that you see it differently than how it really happened. David Miscavige never hit you. You antagonized him into disciplining you. Or, even more extreme, you antagonized people, you hit someone, and now you're just making up that David Miscavige ever hit you. Right? This is the twist up that can happen when somebody receives something like the truth rundown, right? Like really concentrated gaslighting. No, it wasn't the way you remembered. It was this other way. Don't you see? Don't you know? It couldn't be possible. It's impossible. There is no world in which David Miscavige hit you. So you better get your head straight because you're delusional right now. This is literally how Scientologists will talk to you, especially in the Sea Org, if you go running around talking about how David Miscavige hit you. And he really did hit you. But nobody's going to believe it, right? And if they do believe it, they're going to think it's all on you. You did something to force him to hit you. Right? And those twist ups absolutely are having social impact on you. And you're sitting there looking at memories, and there is no way possible for us to be able to differentiate between a valid memory in whatever form, whether it's sight, sound, smell, taste, whatever memory, perception memory, or other conceptual way we have of remembering a thing. There's no way to differentiate that from imagination. So you just made it up. You can't tell. Neither can anybody else. In how you experience the memory, I'm saying. Right? It doesn't fit. Your imagination doesn't feel any different than real memory. Especially if you have a pretty good active imagination. So it's easy for us to therefore doubt ourselves and turn it on ourselves when we have social pressures demanding that our memories can't be what really happened. And this is where it becomes, like I said, malleable like clay, right? You just rewrite it. You just, no, that can't be true. That can't be what happened. There's no way that's what happened. So you either turn the memory off completely, like traumatic episodes where you're abused, like children who are sexually abused, and they just forget about the entire thing. It just blocked off. So you can either do that, or you rewrite it. You tell yourself a different story about the memory because of the social demands. In a nutshell, right? Yeah. And indoctrination. And also, oh yeah, and this is the other thing, indoctrination, right? You can learn things post-event. Like you have an event happen to you, and then you're given indoctrination or new information that can be used to contradict and invalidate the memory, right? And it can be something simple. You're sure you remember that you and your mom were at a picnic in, June 4th or 4th of July, 1996, right? Yeah, we were at the 4th of July picnic. I remember it so well. I remember the fireworks. I remember mom being there. I remember what we ate. And no, you weren't there with your mom. You were there with, or later on, mom tells you, well, no, I wasn't there with you that day. I was with, someone else that 4th of July. And they're quite sure. Your mom is like, nope, nope, nope. This is how it was. Well, now you have this conflict. One of you is misremembering this. And if mom wins that argument, you could end up rewriting your July 4th, 1996 memory. No, she wasn't there because she couldn't have been there because it must have been some other thing, right? We have this happen to us all the time. That later information contradicting our memories makes us doubt the memory, rewrite the memory, invalidate the memory. So yeah, that can happen in hundreds of different ways, and it certainly is kind of interesting when it does. Okay, let's go back here to the chat and carry on with our next question. Xion asks, I knew a girl that had a cognition on her track that as a robot, she had to keep fluids in her body sealed and not leak. But with a flesh body, she shouldn't do that. Any track cognitions for you? Huh. I'm going to tell you a story about somebody else because I'm not thinking of one right now myself, but this came to mind and I thought you might find it interesting. As to how Scientologists coordinate or integrate Scientology auditing with their current life and their thinking. This is a great example of this. It's not my example, but it was one that I was around for. The person this happened to described this all to me. They were a Scientologist, high-level Scientologist, who was getting false purpose rundown auditing back in the 1980s. I was just a kid when I heard this story, teenager. But I believed it. I thought it was true, right? I thought it was a real thing. So this person had a weight problem and was constantly trying to lose weight, Always felt a little heavy in the gut, right? Kind of thing. This was not a massive man, but he was a little overweight, always struggling. And he got this auditing and remembered this time when he was on another planet and they had crashed their spaceship, on Mars or some shit. And the crew had, classic Donner Party kind of thing. The crew was strapped on this planet. There was nothing to eat. There wasn't anything around. They reverted to, they ended up going into cannibalism to eat each other, to survive. And this was the massive, series of overts this man had committed on his past track with the false purpose rundown, going back in time to, past overts. I expect at this point most of my audience can keep up with all the Scientologies. And so this was his great big overt, right? And so then he runs this down to some evil purpose connected with this incident, to kill them, to eat them or something, right? Or I was going to, cannibalize their bodies so I could live, or whatever the evil purpose was that he, dreamed up for that incident. He connected this immediately and at once to his weight problem, right? Well, oh, right, of course. Of course I would have a weight problem because look at the overts I committed connected to eating. So, right? And he was all blown out. And this is what I'm talking about, what I mentioned earlier, right? About these peak experiences not leading to transformation. because he's all blown out. He's all smiles. He's all happy about this great big win he had. And he fully expected that from this point forward, weight wasn't going to be a problem for him. And he was going to be able to lose the weight he wanted to lose. Well, a month later, the dude had same weight. 2 months later, same problems. A year later, same weight problems, because it had nothing to do with it, for one. But two, that's not how you change, right? Is by having peak emotional experiences or false memory syndrome, feeding into your personal problems and issues. So there was that. It's not my story, but it was the one that came to mind. I'm trying to think now, before I leave this question, is there anything like that with me? I mean, I had that one. I did share a few weeks ago. I think I shared that thing about about my eyesight and how I got a session when I was a teenager of Dianetics, and I was trying so desperately. I wanted so badly for Dianetics and Scientology to cure my eyesight, because it was all throughout the materials. Even as a teenager, just with the stuff I'd read by then, I was like, this stuff should work, and I should be able to improve my eyesight, throw my glasses away. Wouldn't that be awesome? And nobody, of course, will promise that to you, but everybody kind of nods and goes, yes, that's possible that can happen, and wouldn't it be awesome if it did? So I had this Dianetic session with that as the goal. I really wanted that, and thought I had it. I had my peak experience, had my cognition. The room seemed clearer and brighter, for that day. Then it went away, because that's what happens, right? So yeah, I guess that's about all I've got on that one. Sorry, it's not super sexy answer, but that's what I got. Okay, Lutz, what's your take on the Department of War, as in language shaping perception and thinking? Yeah, no kidding. These guys are not subtle, are they? I am, like all other things connected with, the rampant stupidity of this administration. This is another point of serious annoyance and upset for me. Renaming the Department of Defense into the Department of War is such a Trumpian, authoritarian, dickhead move, because it used to be called the Department of War when we were at war, and then they changed it to defense because we weren't going to be using language that was going to give people the idea outside of the United States and in the United States that we're a bunch of war hawks and warmongers. And so they changed it to Department of Defense, right? So what do the war hawks and, violence lovers of this administration do? They change it back to Department of War because they're assholes. And, Pete Hegseth is a drunk, alcoholic asshole. And he's able to, I guess, bend Trump's ear and get him on board with anything that will distract from Epstein and the list, and the fact that Donald Trump is a pedophile is fair game, right? So let's do whatever we can to piss off the libs, to distract from the fact that we have a demented, doddering fool who is also a criminal and pedophile in the Oval Office, right? Let's do anything we can to distract from that, make America worse again than it ever was. Let's do that. Let's forward that agenda, and continue to destroy our global reputation as weak as it already has become. Let's make it as bad as possible, right? Let's miscavige the U.S. government. Let's take a bad thing and let's make it so much worse, right? Which is what Miscavige has done with Scientology, and that's what Trump is doing with our government, right? He has brought in a group of people who have to be I mean, I saw a tweet yesterday from the Department of Energy, official government tweet talking about how, energy responsible resources like solar can't be collected at night and therefore are useless to us during the night. And you're like, did you idiots ever hear of a battery? Like, how do you do stuff like that? How do you say things like that? You know, you're stupefied by the stupidity on display. Don't even get me started on RFK Jr. So this Department of War thing, again, it's way out on the periphery compared to the core problems that exist, you know, in our government right now. It's just another knockoff effect of having mentally incompetent, emotionally deficient, narcissistic authoritarians in charge. This is what you get, right? Is you get the collapse of our systems. And that's what Trump is madly at work doing. Madly at work. Yeah. Okay. You guys know how I feel about that stuff, and I don't see any reason to hold back on it, but ugh. Okay, Rod Brown John. Hey, Rod. Hey, Chris. Love seeing you and John the other day. Did you know that Chase Hughes has temporal lobe epilepsy? There's a vid on his YouTube. I do know that. In fact, I mentioned it to, when I said in the show that John and I had been catching up for an hour, I told him all about the Chase Hughes thing. And then the punchline was, and by the way, Chase Hughes has TLE, right? And and John was like, of course he does. Because it seems to be the case. It truly seems to be the case that not only is TLE the most common form of epilepsy, but it's interesting how it keeps cropping up when you look for it amongst predatory, religiously extreme, or what we could say authoritarianly certain individuals, people who have a kind of weird take advantage of the world kind of attitude, but go to this place where they're really, really sure that they have a leg up on everybody else. They're better than everybody else. They know stuff that nobody else knows. They have a way of manipulating and controlling and influencing people that nobody else has yet, achieved their level of greatness. It's like this very, puffed up ego thing. Seems to be connected in some way, right? I don't know enough yet to be able to say for sure that that's always the case. Of course, I couldn't say that. People are complicated, and there's a lot of things that motivate us. But this TLE thing just keeps kind of cropping up, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like, oh shit. Yeah, especially in the religious extremism realm, and then you get into, and I've got to get the pronunciation of this right, so let me look this up real fast. Geschwin syndrome. Geschwin syndrome is a particular set of symptoms that go with temporal lobe epilepsy for some people who have it, and that's where we get the hypergraphia, the hyperreligiosity, the asexual behavior. There's a list of things that get along with Geschwin syndrome, and it's just fascinating stuff, right? It's really interesting. So to find out Chase Hughes had that, and that he's grifting off it. Apparently, I couldn't believe it. I learned Chase Hughes has TLE because he said he has it in a video he made about his brain damage and how he's got this supplement that he's selling you, Blue Meridian or something, which is helping him. So he uses it to continue the grift. I mean, I'm just... you just can't, you just can't believe where people go with this stuff. Blech, hate it, hate it. Okay. Carry on. George Smiley. Hey, George. Sorry you showed up late today. I saw you in the comments there. I know you were a kid, but what was the vibe in the mission your parents attended after the mission holder massacre? Well, okay, so here's the thing. So timing wise, my parents were out before the mission holder massacre. In other words, off of staff by the time that happened. There were years of buildup to the mission holder massacre and the whole mission holders conference that laid waste to those guys. And the mission holders, let's be clear, the mission holders, Carl Barney, who were the other guys up north? I'm mostly familiar with the South guys because that's where I lived. I literally grew up in Pasadena, California, around Carl Barney, who was the main mission holder running the Pasadena mission and the Valley mission. I think Orange County was a mission that he had. San Diego was a mission he had. Santa Barbara was a mission, I think, that ran under Carl. I could be wrong about that. But there were a number of them running under a group called Scientology Coordinated Services, SCS. And that's where my parents were involved. That's what they were involved in. And so I was hanging around in those places, especially in Pasadena. The SCS office was in Glendale or Burbank, I think. And I remember going there a couple times after school. So the attitude in those places that I remember as a kid, most of the time was, pretty Scientology-like-esque. It was chill. It was kind of fun and exciting in the course room. People were titillated and excited by the materials. The auditing was, everybody was groovy, baby. It was the 70s, right? So auditing was groovy. And that's kind of what it was like. There were some times where people would get a little serious or a little, loud or yelly or something, but not often. There wasn't a lot of that I remember. But I didn't hang around with the adults very often either. Most of the time when I was at the mission, I was hanging around in an empty room playing, with toys and stuff. I was very young. But my parents got wrapped up in ethics trouble in the early 80s, I think it was, in conflict with Carl Barney before the mission holder massacre. He was running things with his own brand of dictatorial control. And my dad and he butt heads often enough that it was a dramatic problem. I remember my mom and dad talking and arguing and ranting about Carl Barney, my dad especially. And he was quite in a series of conflicts with Carl. So my parents decided to leave staff, or they got into ethics trouble and got kicked off staff. They were declared suppressive. I'm not exactly sure, beyond what I just told you, what the sequence of events was that led to that. Just what I'm saying. This is all the knowledge I have of it. But the declare was dealt with because my mom and dad went to ASHO, the Sea Org installation closest to where they were in Pac Base, right, the blue buildings. They went there and they asked for and got a committee of evidence to review the whole situation and their declare orders as to whether they were valid or not. And my parents had their declares canceled. They were lifted and they were no longer suppressive. They didn't have to do the whole A to E steps. They got the ComEv and the ComEv went, yeah, you guys shouldn't have been declared. And they were cleared. And they were my mom told me that the OSA wanted them to go back into the missions and go back on staff or go back into that situation and spy and collect information for OSA because they were investigating the mission and the mission holders. And my mom and dad were like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And they moved on. And that was not when they left Scientology. My dad then went on to do OT levels up through OT7. My mom tried to get on to OT5 up through OT5. And that's when she ended up leaving, was a few years after all of this went down. And my dad significantly later. Yeah, Bent Corridon, that's right. He was around in that area too. Was he what was Mission of the Foothills or something? What was Corridan's thing? There was the folks who ended up at the Ventura mission. I think they worked for him, if I remember right, and the Steiners and those guys. Anyway, yeah. So that whole time period, that whole thing. That's what I can tell you about that. So I don't know, George, what the vibe was after the massacre because I wasn't around then. I can tell you that when I got on lines in Scientology, it was 1985. Yeah. 85 is when I got started doing paid official coursework at an org. Prior to that, I'd done some kids courses at the Pasadena Mission. But my first official real foray into Scientology becomes when I'm 15 years old in 85. And this is after the mission holder massacre. And those missions had been converted to orgs. And I went to Santa Barbara, which had been a mission turned into an org. There was a Sea Org command team there. Carol Monroe and Edie Hoyseth, I think, were the CO and the senior CS. And Carol Monroe was a fucking hell on wheels, man. She was the epitome of the hardcore, in your face, rip your face off without even thinking twice about it kind of Sea Org member. She was loud. You know, I remember many times in Santa Barbara being on course in the academy upstairs. So I'm in the official big boys course room, and her office is on the other side of the wall. Like I'm sitting here studying, and on the other side of this wall is her office, where she's got the staff meeting or briefing or product conference every morning. And she's tearing into them routinely, like yelling at them about their stats. Your stat fucking suck. You better get those fucking book sales up or there's going to be fucking rah, rah. I mean, screaming at these people to where I and other students would actually go to the supervisor and be like, this is really loud. Can you get them to tone it down? I'm trying to study, right? And then he would walk down the hall and sort of meekly, you know, put his head in the door and, you know, we got the students over here. Could you, you know, okay, whatever, right? And then 5 minutes later, she's yelling at somebody else. So that's my most immediate answer for you as to, you know, what life was like after the massacre, right? Was they became orgs. And Riverside, thank you, George. It is stupid, you know that. Riverside, that's the one. That's where the Ventura mission folks came from. That's right. That was it. Okay, so yeah, so it was tense. It was hard. It was, you know, and I was a brand new, like so wet behind the ears. I was still dripping. I mean, it was just so new to this. And this is what I walked into is, you know, as a Sea Org CEO. This is my very, very, very first run-in with the Sea Org, by the way. And this is what I think of the Sea Org, right? Is the people who yell and scream at you. I mean, I was like, wow, that lady is scary, you know, and people were like, yeah, you should come work here. And I was like, what? So I can get that? Forget it. I mean, she was the poster child for why I would never want to join staff. And it was very reluctantly that I joined staff, you know, with her in charge. And in fact, I think there was a new ED coming or had just arrived when I joined staff, actually, because I didn't want to work under her. I think this is true. I think this is a valid memory that I'm having right now, that was the case. That I joined staff, I remember being afraid of her. And I remember like some reluctance to join staff because of that. So yeah, and she got replaced out and then she died of cancer or something. Yeah, okay, let's carry on. Young Matador, from your experiences and interviews, which cult have you found to have the most miserable members or ex-members? Apologies, I may have submitted this question twice. Okay. Which most miserable? Oh, wow. Wow, this is a I don't know that I really think about it this way. Um, the the X cult experience is so wildly variable for people. I can talk about cults in terms of grading them by levels of indoctrination, or the volume of thought reform they're bringing to the table, the magnitude of the intensity of the conversion experience, or the intensity of how hard they might work to retain you. All of these are different from one cult or one group to another. But what's not really easy to see, or is which group has more miserable people afterwards than other groups. It's kind of equal opportunity when it comes to that. Because no matter how intense or awful the experience, people are ex-members because, for a reason. Mostly having to do with the fact that they suffered some catastrophic moral conflict and became miserable about it, and or had things done to them, or were victimized in such a way that they're just really kind of fucked up about it. And so if I say, well, listen, the ex-Catholics are a bit more miserable than the ex-Scientologists, I can't see myself saying something like that, because it doesn't work out that way in my experience and with all the interviews and stuff I've done. There's been so much variety of experience in it, and there's so much misery in everyone's ex-cult story. Everyone I think of, I immediately start thinking, because I go, oh yeah, the sexual abuse in the 2x2s was pretty bad, and they're not happy folks when they're out. But then I go, yeah, but are they any more miserable than the Sea Org cadet kids whose lives were ruined by Scientology in the 1970s and 80s? And they never got a leg up, and they never really had a chance at a decent, normal, regular life. And if they can make something of it, great, but otherwise they're pretty miserable. Like, how do I compare these things? I find myself unable to do so. So I'm sorry I can't give you just a one and done simple answer on that one, young Matador, but it's hard to do that. Okay, let's carry on here. The entire country of Luxembourg. Hey, you're back for more. Jon Atack talks a lot and goes around in circles. Do you think he might also have some kind of temporal lobe epilepsy? Okay, that's an interesting thing to say. No, I don't think Jon has TLE. He doesn't demonstrate certain other characteristics of TLE. He's certainly not hyper-religious. Nor is he hyper-atheistic. He doesn't have a compelling pathological level of certainty or grandiose thinking when it comes to his religious, supernatural, paranormal beliefs or ideas, right? Which would be something that tends to go, especially with Geschwin syndrome. Yeah, I don't think Jon has. I don't see the symptomology in Jon, and I don't think that because somebody talks in a way that you find going around in circles, that means they have TLE. No, I don't think so. X-Cyan, do you ever watch any reality shows? Why? I watch documentaries. But in terms of reality shows, quote unquote, no, I don't think so. I watch cooking competitions. Those aren't really reality shows, they're competitions. If anything, they're more like game shows, right? But with cooking. I watch documentaries, which are educational, not really reality shows. I stay away as far away as I can from anything that would be featured on MTV, the CW, or any of those, whatever other channels exist now that go into reality TV stuff. I don't watch any of that crap. I have not once watched The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, Senior Bachelor, The Kardashians, any of the MTV shows. I've never watched more than 2 minutes of any of that before I'm so sickened by what I'm seeing that I just have to turn the channel, even when I'm trying to have fun with it. And I'm just kind of like, oh, let's see what kind of nonsense they're up to today. And you go over to it and you're just like, I can't. I'd rather watch. It would be more entertaining to me, and I'd probably get more out of it if you put a camera on, on a cat show. Okay, yeah, reality shows. Sure, the Pet Collective. You watch the kitten channel, right? Or the dog channel. You watch those channels that have all those videos of all the cats and the dogs doing all the cute stuff. Mel and I really, really love those ones, right? We will watch those for when we're getting all like worked up about stuff. We'll put the the Pet Collective on, and that's not, I don't know that I would call that reality shows though, but it's real. It's real stuff, and it's really cute, and we will watch that stuff. I just can't stand reality TV. I can't stand the lie of it. The hypocrisy of reality TV is too much for me. It's simply trash. And I'm so saddened by the dumbing down effect that it has had on our population as a whole. That people believe this stuff, that people think that this is an accurate reflection of reality, that people form cults of personality around people like the Kardashians, who are simply famous for being famous. There's nothing there. It's like wet tissue paper. It just falls apart in your hands. There's no substance to it at all. There's nothing worth anything in this stuff. It's like watching the old Maury Povich conflict reality stuff where they set up a situation where the lowest common denominator of our population is going to go at each other for sort of faux gladiator-like satisfaction in the audience, right? And it's all conflict drama driven, and even trauma drama driven. And I know some of you love that phrase, but it's an accurate phrase, and it absolutely accurately describes so much of what goes on YouTube and on reality TV is drama. You're watching people's trauma and you're eating popcorn and laughing at it, right? And it's gross. It's gross that is a thing. So that's my hot take on, very original thinking about reality TV. So I'm going to move on, but just can't stand it. Oh yeah, Benson Cam. There's my reality TV. Love that stuff. Okay. Stuart Gorman, have you ever done any welding? What? What? What sort of? I said ask me anything, but this is that's a new one. Wow, Stuart, thanks for coming with the original questions. What sort of sculptures would you weld if you were a metal sculptor? Wow, what a funny question. I have done soldering. I have not done welding. And not a lot of it, but enough to understand the concept, right? If I were a metal sculptor, what would I sculpt? I am very, very impressed by some forms of welding and sculpture, for sure. I've seen some really impressive stuff. But it's not particularly my version, my aesthetic. I would probably weld very delicate, gossamer looking. I would want to get to a skill level with it that would demand pretty high skill level if I was going to sculpt with metal. I would want to do very intricate, seemingly like how's it holding itself up in the air kind of stuff. I think of, like art, oh God, I don't even know how to describe it, but wireframe stuff. I would probably do wireframe sculpting of with metal, different colors, different versions of metal that might, produce different effects. I think about this park in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. There's a park with a bunch of different sculptings and artwork, big stuff. There's that spoon with the cherry, that if you're familiar, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. I could see maybe working on stuff like that, abstract, arty, farty kind of stuff. But it's so not my jam that I'm sitting here like, well, what would I do? It's not something I would ever do, but it might go in that direction if I were going to do sculpting like that, Okay. Don't know what that says about me at all, if anything. John O'Nolan, would there be some Scientologists that have been there for years who have never read Dianetics? Maybe they think it's too boring and one day they will get to it. Before the basics, I would have said yes, absolutely. There were a ton of people in Scientology who have not read Dianetics. I mean, it's a hard book to read. I was in Scientology for 2 decades before I finished Dianetics. No, wait a minute. Oh, hang on. 2 decades? No, 1. I read it on the solo course. I did finally get through it for the first time when I did the solo course. So that was 90s. So yeah, in the first decade, I did read Dianetics. But in doing so is when I learned how few people had read it. Because it was on a check sheet. I had to read it. So if you were going up to OT, you knew you had to read it. But up until then, you could kind of get away with not reading it. Yeah, put it that way. Yeah, and it is a hard read. It is hard. Now, with the release of the basics, everybody in Scientology is reading all the books. And so, so now it's kind of a thing where they're all reading this stuff. How much they understand those books, that's another question. Okay, this is Dortju Orfu. Chris, why don't y'all who have these platforms ever mention R245 in forced exteriorization? I I mentioned it just the other day. I always am blown away by people who come and ask me, why don't you ever talk about, when I literally just did within a soon enough time frame that I remember doing it. But okay, let's R245. It is a process, routine 2, or route 2, I should say, route 2, not routine. Route 2, process 45 is a forced exteriorization process. Yes, it is L. Ron Hubbard jokingly saying that you could take a 45 caliber handgun, shoot somebody with it, kill them, and guess what? They're exterior now. They leave their body. Ah ha ha, what a joke. Until Hubbard started saying to use it on people who had left Scientology or crossed Hubbard in some way, and he was really pissed at them. You know, go liberal use of R245 is called for in this example, right? In this instance, stuff like that. He would say not that, but stuff like that, right? To tell people, you know, go shoot these people, go give these people a hard time, right? It was like fair game kind of stuff. Okay, we'll get to that. Yeah, that's really the long and short of it. Hubbard referenced it in 2 other places I can remember outside of the creation of, I think it's Creation of Human Ability is the book where Route 1 and Route 2 processes are laid out. And yeah, and that's where you get that from. Okay, there you go. That's really the long and short of it. I love this. Somebody named Carol Monroe is asking, would you forgive me if I told you I've left and turned my life around? Yes, of course I would, Carol. But I don't think you're the same Carol. Okay. Oh, damn. And we are coming up on time, so a good time to come to the last 2 questions here. Would there be some Scientologists who joined mostly because they were lonely and looking for a community? Yes, absolutely. Yes, Jono. Some Scientologists definitely came into Scientology because they were lonely and looking for a community. Yes, no question about it. Oh God, yeah, the Lucifer. Yeah, that's a sculpture, that's for sure. Lucifer, the blue Mustang at the airport. Yeah, that Lucifer killed the guy making it. And the final question, John O'Nolan, did you ever meet someone in the Sea Org who was thankful in their mind for how it changed their life? Maybe that person was a slacker and had no purpose in life and now had something to work towards. Well, we all thought that. I mean, everybody in the Sea Org said or expressed something very similar to that to me at one point or another, because the Sea Org, if it's not, you know, driving you in production, it's giving you a purpose or meaning and goals to achieve, right? Quotas to meet, goals to achieve, planet to clear. It sets you on a course and it makes you feel powerful and important because you're on this course, because you're working with these other people who are telling you the same thing about you and them. Aren't we all so awesome and amazing because we're on this path to clearing the planet that we're doing? And our life before the Sea Org had no meaning, had no purpose, wasn't as on purpose or on source as it is now. This is how we would reinforce and retain ourselves in the group, especially when things got rough, is, yeah, but we're here on such a powerful drive, you know? So that's very common. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very common. I never met anyone. Let me put it this way. I never met one person in the Sea Org who would have credibly said to me, well, before I joined the Sea Org, I was doing more than I'm doing now. Or before I joined the Sea Org, I was just as responsible and just as active and just as powerful as I am now inside the Sea Org. No, nobody in the Sea Org is going to say that. The Sea Org is always taking it to the next level. It's moving up to the Sea Org. That's how they talk about it. You're gonna move up. You're gonna come on up, right, to the top. You're gonna join us at the top, right? Very, very much part of the thinking there. So yeah. So we all go there. Okay, good. Okay, and that's our questions. I see your follow-up, Carol, but I'm not going to take the bait. All right, guys, thanks for coming around, watching me gabber on and mad rate. I'm going to let you go, not keep you over this week. We ran a little over last week. I put my book back in the frame. I hope y'all noticed that here. And of course, please like, share, subscribe, get your notifications, do all the things. Support me on Patreon. That would be awesome. I would really very much appreciate that. I know for some of you that's not possible these days, but if it is, and you're enjoying my work and think you're getting something out of it, I would appreciate that love back. Okay. Let's see. Anything else to tell you about? I'm going to try really, really, really hard to get that Chase Hughes video done this week so I can just get that finished off. I've also got a podcast coming on that whole thing, on the whole neuro-linguistic programming grift, the dark psychology grift going on actively right now all over YouTube. I want to do a whole, we're going to do a whole thing on that. So I hope to get that done this week. Otherwise, I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.